planet is a never-ending wonder. 1,000,000 years would barely suffice to see all the sights nature has curated.
Disclaimer. The Hunters Guild has classified this following recording for authorized eyes only. It was produced as an educational video, but upon discovering that it divulged sensitive information, the authority of Dundormas chose to restrict access. The accounts presented here are confidential, and making any part of them public will be considered high treason. Viewer discretion is advised.
Is an extensive overview of all the wonders the New World has to offer. Many of the exploits of the Hunters Guild are well documented within the public sphere. Massive incidents like the Magala investigation or the Moga village rumblings have become legends within Guild territory. However, most of these seminal moments in history are classified as high-rank incidents, meaning that their severity is substantial but not the worst case. Conspicuously absent from public record are any sizable guild interventions of Master Rank level. The Master Rank is a class of hunters beyond reproach, warriors and experts of unimaginable skill, the best of the best, ready for the worst of the worst. And despite this, history records only include their activities as footnotes, singular quests or small-scale reports that do not seem to live up to what the Master Rank ought to be. That is, however, about to change. In this special episode, we would like to present an exemplary find: the diary of an unnamed guild member, a Master Rank hunter. This book contains a subjective record of multiple, hitherto unheard of Master Rank incidents, a record which we will narrate and illustrate. As a Master Rank hunter, this individual experienced tremendous and graphic hardship. Continue at your discretion. It was so bloody wet. That's what I remember most. As we rocked inside the tiny canoe, 4 hunters apiece, the water of the Everstream just kept splashing onto us. The hunter seated behind me, a scarred and rugged gunner, mumbled something about jamming the trigger. I don't know. Never been a fan of guns, never been a fan of the technicalities in general. My hammer does not jam, it only slams. We tried our best to not complain. We knew what was expected of us. Veteran high rankers, all of us. And we wanted to live up to it. Be quiet, be efficient, be deadly. No one had ever briefed us on a situation like this, but we understood and still understand. When all the paperwork is skipped, and when you are whisked away in the middle of the night, asked to pack your strongest gear and then packed into boats alongside the best hunters of your outpost, you know that this is something big. Most of us grew up here in the New World. That means that to many of us, the Elder Crossing investigation was just kind of a constant. News and breakthroughs happened, do not misunderstand, but overall, it felt like an eternal fact of life. Another day, another mystery about these darn Elder Dragons. That changed though, once the 5th and final fleet arrived. They quite literally lit a fire in the hearts of many, myself included, and before long, we were making more progress within weeks than we had in decades. Penetrating the Elder's recess, leading Zora Magdaros into the ocean, facing off against Nergigante. Even in the short time since, these moments have been etched into our guild's history. However, for the public, that's where it ends. Nergigante was slain, Zora is at peace, we are done. For some, that made sense. To many of us, it did not. After all this talk of bioenergy and the rhythm of the new world, it felt too easy. And now that we sit here at our outpost down in the Everstream, I think we were right. We haven't been briefed, we're still waiting for that, and maybe we won't be at all. But one thing is clear. Whatever caused the Elder Crossing awaits us in the dead of night, here, deep within this confluence of fates. It feels like a dream. Yesterday, we were different. The men who sleep now beside me, tired and satiated from the festivities, were not the same ones that rode into the Everstream alongside me less than 24 hours ago. I am not the same. As I sit here, clutching you, dear notebook, I am no longer the high ranker that frightfully entered the cave at the end of the underground tunnels. Our suspicions had been right. The Elder Crossing was not a done deal, its cause not yet eradicated. What we found was indeed... I'm getting ahead of myself. No, I should lay it out properly. Here, in the New World, everything revolves around bioenergy. Don't ask me what it is, I frankly don't know. It's some kind of energy produced by all living things, and it's mighty powerful. Upon death, animals allow their bioenergy to flow back into the soil where it allows the land to thrive, harmony and such. The New World, however, seems to react extremely strongly to those energies. The research boys believe it's due to how many extremely powerful monsters naturally appear here. We even found the skeletons of two enormous Dalamadur. If you ask me, those serpents are what made this land this way. They just flushed it in so much bioenergy when they died that the continent became abundant in high energy and high power organisms. The researchers only nod sheepishly when I suggest this. Either way, not the point. This torrent of bioenergy would eventually have consequences. While in theory, the input of energy coming from dying monsters and the output of fertilizing new life should be equal, when does nature ever work that way? Of course complications arise, and the Earth becomes saturated with more bioenergy than necessary. And eventually, all that pooling energy, unused and stagnant, did what it does best. It created life, not on the surface, but deep within its bowels, in the continental crust. But this life was different. Laying in a cradle of pure, humming energy, it seemingly understood that this bioenergy was its nectar, its lifeline. So it did what all life does and called for more nourishment. And all over, dying elder dragons heard and obeyed, seeking to die on the continent in order to feed, or maybe overload and kill, this embryotic organism. The newest arrival, Zora Magdaros, was almost certainly on its way to fry that youngling before it could grow into a problem. Why else was Nergigante, the protector of balance, so intent on ensuring Zora's safety? But we meddled, as we always do. We thwarted Zora, we slayed Nergigante, and only after this did we discover the truth. Well, the guild discovered the truth, at least. We were only briefed after. After what? Well, without Zora, someone had to clean up that bioenergy spawn. And so, we were sent in. Deep inside the bowels of the continent, we found what I can only describe as an egg containing a sun of ice. The entire chamber was filled with these blue curtains of materialized bioenergy, and in the center, a blinding orb pulsating with the stuff. We didn't need anyone to tell us what we were looking at. The birth of a calamity. Together with the researchers, we endeavored to contain it as quickly as we could, but of course, we were too late. Not even an hour after we had located it, the egg began to shake violently, and before long, beams of light were erupting from its surface. We just about managed to get the researchers and scientists out of the way before the egg broke and out came... something. Calling it a dragon or a wyvern would have been overly generous. It was roughly dragon-shaped, what with its wings, tail, and 4 legs, and yet it just wasn't. It was unlike any life form I had ever seen. The silhouette of something familiar was there, but that was it. Its translucent skin revealed a pulsing blue miasma of pure bioenergy inside its body. Its head was littered with numerous lucent fake eyes, and its body was ripe with filaments and other extraneous tissue. Not to mention how huge it was. Comparable to a small acantor, I guess. Either way, none of us really knew what it was, besides a problem. Especially once it began lunging at us, screeching and wailing in ways I will never forget. But we were, and are, hunters. We did our duty. I could not tell you how long we battled this fiend. We were engulfed in confusion, fear, and tension. Every time we thought we had the upper hand, it did something new. When we believed it exhausted, collapsed on the ground, energy would explode from its chest, and the blue storm inside it would turn a blinding white, the beast's organs brimming with a fiery red as its energy went into overdrive. When we kept our distance to regroup, massive beams of pure light burst from its maw and hit us when we were careless. Just as the researchers observed it to be likely too big and too clumsy to actually fly. Well, it took off almost instantly. However, despite these setbacks, me and my brothers and sisters in arms began to notice it. Something was off. If you spend years hunting and fighting for the guild, you develop a couple of extra instincts. Where to find the best herbs, what weapons to use, what to order at the feline chef. But most of all, you learn to tell what a monster is truly capable of and how worried you should be. You simply don't stay alive for long if you can't do that. With how much power this creature had, it should have been able to wipe us out almost instantly. And yet here we were, minutes, maybe hours into our confrontation with it, struggling but still decidedly not vaporized. First, I thought the beast was toying with us, as powerful monsters are known to do. But then it stumbled. And again. And again. And it became clear to me, to us, that this was indeed a flailing newborn. A dragon made of starlight is such an imposing image that it is easy to forget that it is still just an animal. And while some animals are born with immediate self-sufficiency, some are born soft, confused, and unskilled. And we believed that such was the case here. We were alive because this thing was, frankly, just very bad at using its abilities. Moreover, it seemed erratic and clueless, no strategy, just pure, newborn survival instinct. Once we managed to communicate this discovery between the team, we began our counterattack. The young Dual Blades user swirled around the monster's toes and littered them in hundreds of tiny cuts. Nowhere near serious, but deep enough to make walking extremely annoying. The old gunner, meanwhile, bombarded it with paralysis ammo, not to paralyze it, but to have the many stinging pricks of the ammunition be a constant irritator to the beast. My hammer swung at the side of its head relentlessly, not powerful enough for a decisive blow, but adequate to cause a mild headache. The goal was to frustrate it, to provoke its childish temper, and to make it careless. Wielding this much energy must come with risks, and, so we argued, if we made the monster lose its temper gradually, we might just coax it into taking a risk it can't recover from. This was confirmed once we realized that its angry screams synchronized with the constant reddening of its organs, meaning that this agitation was wearing it down. And before long, the decisive moment came. Glowing like a raging sun, the monster roared and released an enormous explosion from its body, one that would have easily killed us had we all not been ready and hid behind the shield of the lance user. And beyond the smoke and brimstone, the beast lay on the ground, whining, exhausted, barely able to stand. We concentrated all of our efforts directly onto its head and chest one last time, and finally, it twitched violently and then moved no more. We had won. Everything after that point moved very fast. The body was taken in for study, we were brought back to Astera, and before we knew it, we were celebrating. I admit I barely took notice of the commander announcing our heroic victory to the public. The declaration of this creature's classification as an elder dragon and christening as Xenojiva only slightly caught my attention. No, we were all not there. We were different than we had been before this incident. Before, we were experienced hunters, experts of combat, of all things monstrous. I myself had wrangled Rajangs, dodged a charging Tigrex, and outsmarted a Kuropeko. We all had done things that had made us believe we understood nature. We were able to stand up to it. But not anymore. Yesterday's battle was not won through our strategy, but through luck. Had Xenojiva been born earlier, had it been born with a less excitable temper or with more innate control, we would have been turned to ash. I was used to fighting animals, but yesterday we fought a natural catastrophe. I'm getting tired. I should rest my pen and just finish this entry. This victory celebration was not noteworthy. There was very little of interest. No? Wait. One thing struck me. While most researchers were ecstatic at the news, one older Vivarian seemed to scowl in concern. I asked him what he thought. No idea why I did. But his answer rings in my head still. It's a worry in the back of my head. One that returns, underlined by the images of the brooding chamber's walls lined with blue filament, pieces of tissue strewn about. Tissue that looked exactly like the egg that we saw hatch. Those images flared up again as the researcher voiced his concern. Was that really the only egg? If books had feelings, I would ask you, dear notebook, to forgive me. Much has happened. The battle against Xenojiva seems like a distant memory. It has been almost 2 years now, after all. In that time, we at the Guild have lived through many new discoveries. We discovered the hinterlands following a massive Legiana migration. We founded Celiana, where I now sit in my room, writing into this very notebook. We defended our home against the Iceborn Queen, and then we vanquished the Everworm. We discovered an impossible island where every beast dwells. We have progressed far beyond what anyone would have thought possible. Me? I'm a Master Rank Hunter now. A formality, an honor mostly given as a necessity since the hinterlands are forbidden to anyone of lower distinction. But still, I am proud. Fighting alongside my brothers and sister has been and continues to be an honor. No matter how often a longsword almost grazes my cheek or a fellow hammer sends me flying, this is my life and I wouldn't want to have it any other way. But let's return to Xenojiva. While I had forgotten about it, reopening this notebook has brought the feelings rushing back. As a master hunter, I have faced things the man that wrote the previous entries could not have imagined. And yet, deep inside, I feel uneasy when I think of Xenojiva. And it has taken me quite some time to understand why. All living things fall into an order. There is a logic, an underlying rulebook that guides all life. Even the craziest creatures, such as the Elder Dragons, are mythical only because we designate them as such. They are animals, powerful animals, but animals. This is fundamental to my relationship to hunting. We of the Guild engage with the world through these animals, strengthen ourselves through their hides, and revere them as we strike them down. There is respect, there is understanding. To look upon any living creature means to look at a brother, distant he may be. Kinship is the word I'm looking for, I think. This is a philosophy that has held true for every being I've encountered, except Xeno'jiiva. I looked at the Dragon of Light and I saw no animal. I saw a monster. A being that made no sense on any level I could conceptualize. There was no kinship, no shared lineage within the cradle of nature. Only death and brimstone. I must banish my thoughts, however. Tomorrow, we descend into the bowels of the Guiding Lands. The Seeker has found something troubling, and I will be part of the initial recon unit. So, I must rest. Curse the day I picked up my hammer! Curse it all! I must hurry. We're doing shifts. We found it. Gods. No, it found us. The researcher was right. There was another egg. The Xeno'jiiva we killed. It was not an only child. Another, an elder brother, must have hatched before we found the nest chamber and escaped into the Guiding Lands. While we were busy aggrandizing ourselves in the hinterlands, toiling with the Everworm, this Xeno'jiiva was here, in a valley, molting and growing. And once we did find it, it was too late. We arrived yesterday, and my dear notebook, my heart froze. The veils of shed skin that littered the area revealed to me what the researcher had only begun to theorize. This was what remained of the juvenile Xeno. What lay in the depths was an adult. We soon found it. It soon found us. While it was born a fleshy infant of blue light, it is now a red dragon, with a hide so tough my hammer bounced right off. We are besieging it around the clock in shifts, and yet very little progress has been made. It's my turn. They want me to go fight it again. Curses. Safi-Jiiva. That is the name given to that thing we fought. The thing we survived. Yes, we slayed it. It was, perhaps, the greatest collective guild effort in its history. 4 days we fought, day and night, going in and out of the battlefield in shifts to allow for rest and recovery. I have never seen something like this. I pray I never see it again. Safi-Jiiva. In the end, the differences between it and its juvenile form warranted a separate classification, similar to the Magala species. The red dragon was a master of bioenergy, not merely its vessel. When we heard it, Safi-Jiiva simply sucked energy out from the very soil beneath it and regenerated its wounds instantly. If it tired of swiping at us with tooth and claw, it fired off beams and blasts of pure blue energy, not unlike Xeno'jiiva, but much more focused and much more dangerous. I will not gild the truth. We suffered casualties. While we know that this is a risk, I had forgotten what it felt like. But neither me nor anyone else was prepared to see how Safi-Jiiva kills. As we battled it, it continuously charged itself from the surroundings, a habit that explains how barren its nesting grounds look. After a while, it would float up and compress all of its power into a single drop of bioenergy, not bigger than a human tooth. This, we now know, was Pandemonium. The sapphire of the Emperor. This hyper-concentrated bomb of energy vaporizes anything within range if it explodes. I saw a charge blade wielder just vanish. A human being undone into nothingness within the blink of an eye. Me and the others only survived by instinctively hiding behind thick boulders that dotted the area. While the sapphire is devastating, it seems to be less effective against inorganic material. Knowledge that was gained through the blood and the loss of our comrades, but invaluable either way. May they find peace. The siege seemed unwinnable. We knew we could die. We always know that. But fighting with your life on the line, and fighting an unnatural monster that can annihilate matter in an instant, are two very different things. We would almost certainly have lost hope, had it not been for one bright huntress. During the battle, Safi'jiiva changed locations regularly, and after a shift, the huntress remarked that the beast wasn't merely running around aimlessly. It was continuously descending into the earth, retreating further and further into the continental crust, downwards. Why? Why would it need to escape downwards specifically? This question fueled us as we began paying more attention, and within a few hours, we had our answer. Safi'jiiva always moved downwards after absorbing energy from the environment a few times. The worse we hurt it, the more it had to regenerate, the sooner it would choose to descend. This left us with an hypothesis. Because it used this valley as a home for so long, bioenergy was scarce and easily used up, and so to keep healing its injuries, Safi'jiiva had to descend further and further into depths yet untouched, still brimming with primal energy. Suddenly, vigor returned to us. We knew what we had to do. Ironically, our strategy was essentially identical to how we defeated its juvenile sibling. No more killing blows, no more dramatic combos. We began focusing on inflicting frequent but shallow wounds, saving our strength while forcing the beast to continuously heal itself, even if only a little. The researchers hypothesized that eventually, Safi'jiiva would descend to a depth at which no crevice or opening would allow the massive dragon to go deeper, where we would slay it. It was a gamble. If such a perfect slaying spot didn't exist, if the beast could just go down and down forever, we would face an impossible battle of attrition. But if it did get stuck, it would quickly run out of healing capabilities, and then we could kill it. But considering that I'm writing this, you've probably already surmised that that gamble paid off. After what felt like an eternity, we reached it. A massive cave with no way down. The beast understood, and we did as well. This was it. Among emerald green gases and rocky spikes, we would either slay it or vanish in the light of the sapphire. The former came to be. No one remembers who struck the final blow. There was no cheering, no elation. We sat in silence around the beast's corpse, ready to enter the fray again should it miraculously move. And as we sat there, each of us, I think, wrestled with the thoughts left behind. Everyone sought to make sense of what we had witnessed, a dragon capable of wielding the very energy of life against us. We had stared into the abyss, and our eyes were left aflame with the images of a sapphire blue death. The guild holds many secrets. It has now been a few months since Safi'jiiva was slain, and I still find myself wondering about what they were hiding. From the moment we hauled the monster's corpse into Celiana, there was tension among the guild members. A subdued yet hastened frenzy befell them, as they snapped and barked at anyone who inquired about this incident. Secrecy is nothing new, but that odd nervousness certainly was. What's more, the very next day, Celiana held an award ceremony, vowing to honor exceptional hunters. Every one of those hunters just so happened to be those that had survived Safi'jiiva, myself included. It was clear that the guild wished to pacify us preemptively. Something big was about to shake us all, and they wanted us to like them beforehand. Nevertheless, I now stand as a hunter of the Great Master rank. While not an official designation, Great Master is an additional honor that can be given to the most brilliant of Master Hunters, signified by the great golden G that now adorns my guild card. The rugged gunner joked that they should just make a rank above Master already, just call it G rank or something. I like him. Back on topic. I, and I assume many others, suspected that this ceremony was meant to get the people into good spirits, to prepare for potential bad news or information leaks. And sure enough, within the week, the cat was out of the bag. Suppressing information is harder the juicier the gossip, and this one was bound to spread like wildfire. By analyzing Safi Jiva's shell, the Commission's research team discovered that it had not actually finished molting, indicating that there is another, yet unseen step to the Jiva's life cycle. We had not fought an adult, merely an adolescent. Once this was out, the rumor mill turned and turned until everyone reached the same baseless conclusion. Safi Jiva would likely have evolved into a black dragon. As someone who was intimidated firsthand by our fight with the red dragon, even I found this theory bizarre. For starters, black dragons don't exist. They are not a recognized classification and no evidence of their existence has ever been verified. They carry the typical traits of legend. Wings that bring ruin, breath that suffocates the sky, eyes that skewer the soul, yada yada. Black Dragon is nothing more than a catch-all term for all unexplained events and dangers, because it is scary and because it is awe-inspiring. Or at least, that's what I thought, up until a few days ago. As the rumors were stirring, a troubling visit occurred. Hooded men, cloaked in black, wandered the streets and reprimanded any who spoke of the Black Dragons. They are the Pure, a fundamentalist branch within guild authority, and much of the reason why Dundorma engages in information suppression in the first place. They sought an audience with the Commission and, in the process, bolstered everyone's confidence in the existence of Black Dragons. Why hide something that doesn't exist? What didn't help either was a lone historian reciting discrepancies in the guild records to anyone who would listen one tipsy evening. For an organization that is notoriously meticulous about hoarding information, their historic record is full of bizarre non-descriptions. The fall of the Shrade Kingdom or the pillaging of the Sacred Lands, massive events that yet leave no trace, according to the guild. I don't know if I doubt the guild's intentions. But at the very least, the Black Dragons might not entirely be legend after all. Just as I thought. No. Not today. Not now. I can't. I have collected my thoughts. Attempt number 2. They are real. The Black Dragons exist. Not only that, but I fought one. I killed one. Alright, no. Let's start at the beginning. Shortly after the members of the Pure cult arrived in Celiana, work became eerily quiet. Fewer quests were issued, and HQ seemed continuously tense and busy. Before long, many of us were just lounging around, unable to go on any assignments, as there really weren't any. Then, one night, a few of us were called into a briefing. Sitting in that room, I immediately recognized the assembly. It was all of the survivors of the Safi Jiva siege, the Grandmaster Hunters. And what we learned in there made it clear why we were chosen. Black dragons are real. They are not myth, they're not a fabric of our collective cultural paranoia. They are living, breathing animals. Except that they genuinely bring about disaster on an unfathomable scale. In the briefing, our commander recited a few historic events, previously believed to be unexplained, that were actually confirmed Black Dragon incidents. I was surprised to not find the fall of Shrade among them. A kingdom vanishing in a single night seems like a prime candidate. But as we were seemingly learning the whole truth, I guess Shrade still remains a mystery, even to the innermost circle of the guild. After this revelation, we were bombarded with excuses and rationalizations for keeping these secrets. Think of the panic, the chaos. It was wasted effort. We understood our role. The rugged gunner snorted sarcastically at some of the reasons, but that aside, no one dared raise any objections. Which led to the actual topic of the briefing. A black dragon had moved into the guiding lands. After driving out Safi Jiva, a new creature migrated into the secluded valley and now dwelt there. An ancient monster, the blazing black dragon, Alatreon. Surprisingly, we actually knew a lot about this beast already. Since the black dragons are treated as myths and playground horror stories, people love to talk about them when no one is listening. And to our shock, much of what we had heard in those myths was actually true. Alatreon is the master of the elements, capable of utilizing all of them. A power that drives the dragon mad, making it unstable and unpredictable. And that was the very real problem we were tasked to solve. If that Alatreon went on to an elemental rampage, the resulting destruction could easily wipe out the entire research commission and undo all progress done in the new world. Thus, we were given our quest. Fly to the secluded valley in the dark of night and slay the Alatreon. We took it pretty well, considering the circumstances. After Safi Jiva, the revelation that humanity's most iterated and mythologized fear was actually real did not shake us as much as it honestly should have. We just sat in silence, not the uncomfortable kind either. Personally, while I thought that this was wild, my bizarre calmness was a testimony to my ability and my experience, so I rationalized. I had witnessed the sapphire of the Emperor. Surely, I was ready for a black dragon. I could not have been more wrong. Do you know that feeling when a thought forces itself into your head? No matter what you do, or how inappropriate it is, it just enters your mind and stays? That's what happened to me that night, as I stood in the secluded valley and spotted the Alatreon. I suddenly remembered a story I had heard from a hunter from one of the Wyverian divisions. From Yukumo, or maybe it was Kamura? Anyway, I thought of how he told me about reverse scales. Some ancient dragons were told to be born with one or more scales that grew upside down, pointing upwards sharply towards the heavens. Legend says in those lands that touching that scale would send the dragon into a frenzy that would last until it had washed itself in the blood of 1,000 humans. For a moment, I wondered why such a random thought would appear in this crucial moment. Then I realized the dragon I was looking at was covered in nothing but reverse scales. From head to toe, the Alatreon was covered in black, upside-down scales that pulsated at the edges in various colors. Atop its head sat an unnatural crown of 2 horns, and the amount of armored plating made it look as if it shouldn't be able to move. but it moved. It existed. And before I could finish my train of thought, it noticed us. And then the horrors began. Master of the elements means very little on paper. Yes, we had heard that Alatreon can use all elements. The commander even philosophized that this black dragon might be the progenitor of all elemental species. But to be there, to witness it, was something entirely different. One moment, the air was freezing. The next, our clothes would catch fire through heat alone. The very act of existing near Alatreon was painful and labored for us, while the beast did all of this passively. Once we got close enough, it attacked in ways I couldn't even begin to describe. Icicles charged with dragon energy, curtains of lightning, waves of oil that ignited alongside a fiery breath. It was a cacophony of nature's most destructive forces, and at the center, the blazing black dragon, Alatreon. We had our hands full just weathering the assault, with little chance of counterattacks. We were not fighting a monster, not handling a quest. We were being bombarded with the fury of nature itself. But even then, we had hope. We had faced inexplicable terrors before, and we could do it again. And at this precise moment, maybe by coincidence, maybe not, Alatreon decided to enlighten us. To show us what fighting a black dragon truly means. Throughout our back and forth, the beast was constantly powering up, its scales humming with energy. The insect glaive-wielding huntress once again proved her foresight. She screamed at us that we should use our Farcaster and regroup, that we could not weather whatever was coming next. Before I could protest, she had grabbed me onto her caster and taken off. But as fast as that was, we were still in range when it happened. The guild now calls it the Eschaton Judgment, a violent hurricane of elemental wrath unleashed when the Alatreon reaches critical power levels. My words do not do it justice. It was as if the valley was suddenly swallowed by a raging sun. Me and the huntress barely escaped, but I got to see. I watched the stragglers get caught in it. The rugged gunner scrambled with his Farcaster an instant too long and paid a heavy price. When we saw our comrades vanish in the light of Safijiva's sapphire, it was quick, a flash, and they were gone. I wish I could say the same with the Eschaton Judgment. I saw the gunner. I watched his skin freeze solid, only to see it burst into a boiling mess a second later. I watched lightning erupt from his mouth. I can never forget his eyeballs exploding from the heat. I must calm myself. He has found peace now, and that is all there is to it. After this, our morale was crushed. What was there for us? What hope lay beyond the Eschaton? For the first time in my life, I heard word of desertion. It was a half-hearted suggestion, but nonetheless, it was dire. I was still reeling from what I saw, but somehow I spoke up. This time, it was my turn to bring us to victory. I had noticed that while many of the Alatreon's attacks seemed to occur almost without the beast's command, its horned crown always lit up when the elements danced. I hypothesized that if we injured the horns, the Alatreon might be weakened enough for us to actually fight back. The rest of the fight was a blur. Within my mind, all I saw were those horns. As my lips froze shut and my hair singed, the horns were all I could think of. My movements, my breathing, the very rhythm of my being concentrated solely on breaking that crown and after what felt like an eternity, we heard it. A loud crack, so loud that it drowned out the roaring flames and slashing lightning. The horns had broken. Instantly, the Elatreon was swaying, dazed and in pain. Without me wanting it, a cry erupted from my lips. The other hunters joined in. Exhausted, broken, injured, it mattered not. We had glimpsed victory, and we threw ourselves at it. The Lancers erected shield walls to regroup behind, while any who still could stormed the Black Dragon relentlessly. For all its powers, regeneration was not one of them. Clearly weakened, it fought back clumsily, and, I tell myself, it may even have felt fear for the first time in its existence. An existence that was cut short by my hammer. As I brought it down upon its head one final time, I felt it, like I had many times before. The slight change in resistance, the tiniest amount of give. A fractured skull. A brutal victory. Sure enough, it did not get back up. What happened after all of this is a pure haze. We were honored greatly for our efforts, given stupid amounts of compensation, and elevated to the highest possible rank. We all retreated into our new domiciles, gifts from the guild, and that's where we are now. Where I am. It's been many weeks now, and I have not returned to hunting. I don't know if I ever will. I really must apologize for the dire tone my last entry ended on. It has now been 8 months since the Elatreon battle, and I have indeed returned to my craft. I now educate the next generation of hunters, and I must say, it has given me renewed purpose. Seeing a neophyte swing a hammer for the first time? Yeah, it's all worth it. It has made returning to hunting life so much easier. Following Elatreon, we entered into an era of peace. No major incidents, just growth and progress. There are even murmurs that we will soon spearhead a third settlement on the New World. These are exciting times, and little of that dread I felt remains. That is not to say I don't think of it. Of course I do. I don't believe I could ever forget. But by focusing on my day-to-day, I managed to cope and remain positive. Today, for example, is a big day. The guild has authorized the commission's first communal huntathon, an exercise where a large number of hunters is dropped into a locale with the goal of entirely exterminating a problematic monster population. In our case, we are mobilizing about 80% of the commission's force to a remote island that has become infested with fanged beasts. Blangonga, Kongalala, even a few Rajang. It'll be a great event, especially for the newbies. It might be a bit excessive to send so many hunters, but I suppose they want the first exercise of the New World to be one to remember. In fact, I am setting sail tomorrow, and I am bringing this notebook alongside me. We will remind ourselves what we are capable of, and I will write it all down right here, and hopefully, I will continue to live free of the horrors of this past year. We have been at sea for a full day now, and something seems off. The mood is merry, plenty of drink, plenty of song, the usual. And frankly, I wish I could join in, but something is bothering me. Our travel group is made up of 8 ships, all sailing next to each other, a sizable fleet for a mere exercise. It didn't strike me as too odd, until we heard that we were also going to be joined by an old world fleet tomorrow. 8 ships was already overkill, but more? How many hunters were participating? When approached, our supervisor barked something about a joint operation at us, that the island we were headed to was in worse shape than we thought, or whatever. I don't buy it. Not anymore. On our own 8 ships, we house some of the most advanced hunters of our guild. All of us who fought Elatreon are here as well. No fanged beast infestation could justify such a massive mobilization. 1,000 Garangolm all at once, maybe, but they are endemic to the Elgato Kingdom, so I can't imagine we'll find any on that island. It just does not add up. I don't want to think that we're being tricked, but for now, I will remain alert and observant. How? How could we let them fool us? How could we be so stupid? There never was an island. There is no fang beast infestation. Okay. One thing after another. This is supposed to be a record, and a record it shall be. My suspicions remained, and were only fortified once we joined the Old World unit. Or rather, the Old World fleet, as an enormous number of ships met us on the open sea, more than I could count immediately from my limited viewpoint. I believe I heard a steward mention over 60? Curses, how dumb do they think we are? Even without an exact number, anyone could see that this was likely one of the largest mobilizations in the entire history of the guild. No one would believe the official story now, and in fact, no one does. The enthusiasm of our first day at sea gave way to nervous confusion. We all understood that we were not headed to a Rajang-filled island, but the things we did not understand gnawed at us. What operation would require such a massive force, and why would it be kept a secret even to the deployed hunters? My personal confusion grew even further before long. The ship that now sails next to us looks just ever so slightly different than the standard issue model. The wood is sturdier, the metal hinges shinier, and the masts better maintained. It looks like it was made to seem innocuous, but it cannot hide the traces authority leaves. Authority whose presence was confirmed when I walked out onto deck last night to get some air. As I stood there, gazing at the starry sky, I noticed that the shiny ship next to us also had people on deck. They didn't seem to notice me, fully immersed in their maps and discussions. And in the candlelight, I saw them. Chainmail covered by royal blue and red cloth, a high neck guard, a sturdy visored helmet. There is no hunter that wouldn't recognize this uniform. Dundorma Guards. They were the standing military force of the guild's capital city, Dundorma, and their presence all but confirmed that this was a crisis unlike anything we had ever witnessed. And it didn't end there. In their midst, I spotted him. A tall, dark-skinned man wearing the hunter's crest upon a white cape, hiding royal armor. I knew him instantly, and I knew him well, albeit from afar. This was the general, the highest military authority besides his immenseness himself. If he was here, this was very serious. We would not understand how serious it truly was until we steered too close to land earlier today. Maybe by mistake, maybe by callous indifference to our continued ignorance, we passed by a coastline that gave away our direction. I had already formed my suspicions when a fellow hunter exclaimed, "That is the Speartip Crag, right?" He was right. Before us, a massive rocky spire stretched into the heavens, the Speartip Crag. This monument is a hallmark of guild legend, where a team of hunters are said to have slain a Dalamadur that was perched along its entire height. Seeing this wonder in person did not fill us with glee, however, but with utter terror. Seeing the Speartip Crag confirmed two things. One, that we were indeed seeing the coast of the old world. And two, that because we were looking at the crag from our left, we were going further westward. And on the northwestern tip of the old continent, at the end of this trajectory, there was only a single place of note. Usually, there'd be no way we could deduce from this vague direction that we were going exactly there. But everything, the overwhelming number of troops, the presence of the top brass, the enormous secrecy, it all combined with this simple direction into one horrifying, immobilizing realization. We are headed towards the Shrade Kingdom. Calling Shrade a kingdom these days is fairly misleading, actually. Once, the Shrade Kingdom was large and prosperous, controlling a vast part of the western continent. The Shrade were advanced, civilized, organized, and highly ambitious people. But then, they just vanish from the historic records. It is said that in a single night, the kingdom was brought down in its entirety as the castles crumbled and the people died in the thousands. Today, all that remains is the name Shrade, which is sometimes used to refer to the region around Kokoto, and a castle, the former capital of the kingdom, which sits at the northwesternmost tip of the continent. Why am I writing down a history lesson? Well, to distract myself, of course. From the moment we sighted Speartrip Crag, the morale on our, and all other ships, plummeted. No more song, no more drink. All the hunters are silent. Some sob at night. Our superiors have stopped bothering to repeat the cover story about the island and the fanged beasts. In fact, almost all conversation has ceased. Without a single word being uttered, we had all understood where we were going, and what we were tasked with. What happened to Shrade was long considered a mysterious tragedy, a horror story that fascinated generations. While official sources simply describe it as vanishing overnight, public mythology quickly began to spread, and a different story took hold. The event that wiped out Shrade was given a name: Fatalis, the end of mankind. The name was taken from an old nursery rhyme that described a dragon that would end the world. Due to that connection, people quickly began believing that what had destroyed Shrade was indeed the dragon from that very poem. And as they are wont to do, the people took it further. Fatalis was the name of the dragon itself, a black dragon in fact, the king of dragons. It smothered Shrade in a sea of flames. It melts humans onto its skin to strengthen its hide. And should a hunter slay it, the armor made from its flesh will fuse with its killer and warp them into the next Fatalis, immortalizing the dragon for as long as humans exist. Just 3 short years ago, I, like many others, laughed at these rumors. Frightening legends meant to scare kids into eating their greens. But after what we had experienced, we knew in our bones that we could not just dismiss it. Zeno and Safi Jiva taught us that there are forces beyond comprehension. Alatreon taught us that black dragons exist and how powerful they really are. We could not reasonably ignore the very real possibility of Fatalis existing. And with this operation having unraveled its truth as it had, there was no doubt. We had fought Alatreon, a black dragon. We were now on our way to fight Fatalis, the black dragon. I am reminded of the poem that name originated from. I'm surely not the only one. The poem was originally nameless, but after it had been connected to the Shrade tragedy through decades of mimetic repetition, most people began calling it the Legend of the Black Dragon. I cannot believe that that was coincidence. I knew that both the subject of the poem and the usurper of Shrade were one and the same. The poem was an elegy to the king of dragons. When the world is full of wyverns, the legend is revived. Meat dissolves, bone decays, and blood is sucked up dry. It burns the earth and melts through iron. It boils the rivers and mows down trees. It awakens the winds and brings the inferno. It is called Fatalis, the wyvern of destiny. It is called Fatalis, the wyvern of destruction. Call for help, run for your lives, and don't forget to pray to the skies. It is called Fatalis, the wyvern of destiny. It is called Fatalis, the wyvern of destruction. Fatalis, Fatalis, heaven and earth are yours. Fatalis, Fatalis, heaven and earth are yours. That's the sound of the ramp being loaded. We are here. We are here. I want to go home. I want to go home. We have engaged the dragon. It is day 2 of our all-out assault on him. I have just recovered from my first shift. I will recount. Castle Shrade is a shadow of its former self. Its massive walls crumbled and all traces of civilization rotted away. Despite that, the original layout of the forest is still as tactically advantageous as it was in its heyday. The main square is armed with cannons, ballistae, roaming guns, and even an antiquated dragonator. All you could ask for if you want to besiege an elder dragon. So we set up our fortifications, and we waited. According to the briefing, rumblings were heard from the castle, so if we staked it out, we would be sure to find our target. We didn't, however, anticipate how soon it would appear. As if specifically called forth by our presence, this thing emerged from the ruins, almost serpentine, except its massive wings and articulate limbs. I did not get a good look at it until my first shift. I really wish I hadn't. Everything was true. In fact, the legend did not do this creature justice. Its unnaturally long neck allowed its deadly maw to reach impossible angles and places. I saw a dual sword wielder be turned to ash after the beast craned its head under its tail through its armpit. Its hide is nigh on impenetrable and already adorned with the molten remains of my comrades. I even witnessed the so-called Sea of Flames. At one point, the fiend flew high up into the air, not through the force of its wings, but through the concentrated heat in its chest, rising it upwards. The hell it then unleashed was truly an ocean of fire that engulfed all the eye could see. My group only survived because we hid behind a metal fortification, which melted in the process. But none of that matters. No horror, no long-winded chain of terrible events can compare to the nightmare I endured in that single moment. As I was charging one of my swings, like I have done 1,000 times, the monster reared its head, swiping an arc across the floor to ram my brothers, an arc that ended with the head right in front of me. A perfect opportunity, but instead, I froze. My body was paralyzed the instant I looked into its eyes. Or rather, it froze the moment I realized that this creature had no eyes. Its sockets held nothing I could call eyes. Instead, 2 rocks, orange gemstones, sat within them, attached seemingly to nothing. The sheer nonsense of this discovery chilled me to the bone. These sockets were filled with dead stone, and yet I could see it in them. Life. A life of pure, unadulterated malice. It peered into my soul, and within a few blinks of the eye, communicated to me eons of hate and destruction. These inanimate gems burned with a passion that sought to make me as dead as their rocky selves. But there was something else. Looking at these eyes, I felt a sensation utterly alien to me. Fear doesn't quite fit. It was more akin to primeval dread. I instinctively knew what I was looking at. I was not looking at an animal or even a monster. I was looking at my natural predator. I was looking at Fatalis. By the time I regained my senses, I had already been dragged back to our encampment, where I still remain for now. As I hear the battle continues on, the researchers are observing around the clock, struggling to compose a battle strategy. So far, all I've understood is that damaging the beast's horns cools its fire somewhat. I don't want to go back out there. I don't want to face it. I never want to stand in its presence again. I want to go far away. But I cannot. In that fateful instant, I saw the truth. This creature doesn't live to eat, to drink, to reproduce. Its one and only purpose is to torment humanity. Me being human means I will never be free so long as this demon stands. And despite that, I want to flee. I want to throw down my weapon. I don't want to go out there again. They will call me in soon, but I don't want to. Yet I must. No time to fall apart. I will face this devil alongside my brothers and sisters. And together we will show it what humanity is capable of. We are monster hunters, after all. Thank you everyone so much for watching, and thank you for coming on this long journey with me. But we did it. We did the Monster Hunter videos. A very special thank you to all of my patrons, without whom these videos would not be possible. A very special shout out to Carthair, Fiction Ape, Sini, Courage, Eric Nelson, Aaron Camel, Jameson Tate, Ludenther, Paracha, Pero Scocco, Project Iceman, That's Just Ash, Wisdom Manari, Mr. Meander, and Geo. Thank you all so much, and I will go rest because this was so much harder than I thought. All right, take care, y'all. Bye.